How do they see us there? Because, I mean, when the UN Resolution 1973 came up, and then, but now, even international media seem to be asking their own government questions as to, are you actually going beyond that resolution by guiding the rebels to locate Gaddafi? And then Nigeria also, of course, was one of those who voted for that resolution. And then South Africa saying, no, we acted in a haste. And so we wonder, what's going on? How are we taking our steps and how are we perceived out there?
Well, I think that based on objectivity of purpose, we are perceived as an honest broker. Simply because as a current non-permanent member of the Security Council, since January 1, 2010, to date, we've been very proactive. We've played active parts, and the international community recognizes this fact.
To what benefits? What is our ideology?
Our ideology is straightforward. The current foreign policy of the Jonathan administration is largely predicated on protection of human rights, of humanitarian rights, of democracy, of transparency, of accountability. In other words, the foreign policy is advancing, preaching good governance.
Is it still Afrocentric, or has it moved beyond?
Well, it is Afrocentric and it is also global centered. The meaning is this. When we are talking about Afrocentrism, what we are simply saying is that priority will be given to Africa as a foreign policy operational area of application. The interest can be African, it can be global based. You see, when Agbola Gambari came up with this concept of foreign policy concentricism, what he had in mind is that since our security interest is intertwined with the immediate neighbors, that of the immediate neighbors, we should give priority to that, first priority, before moving to West Africa as a region. Now, what is happening is that we discovered that we have more vested interests outside of Africa, and they have to be protected. So our foreign policy interests, talking about good governance, democracy all along, compel Nigeria to sign, to agree with Resolution 1973.
Okay, now, Prof, now that you've mentioned that that our foreign policy is looking more towards human rights, what if those rights come in conflict with the sovereign rights of a nation? How do we handle situations like that? Have we shown an example with what we've done with Libya?
In that case, I will not agree with you, because it cannot come into conflict with the sovereignty of any country. You see, when people easily condemn even the NATO countries, saying they've gone beyond the scope of application, I don't agree with them.
Why?
There are two fundamental constitutional rights that people easily ignore. First of all member states of the United Nations are compelled, because they have agreed to ab initio, that they will respect the resolutions, they will implement the directives as given. The UN Security Council is just like the executive government of the United Nations. The assembly is just like the parliament. Now, when the resolution was signed, you are pretty bound to implement. And when they even accuse the NATO of now saying hijacking, I do not agree. If you take Article 106 of the UN Charter, it provides that where there is a crisis, before the UN is able to interfere or intervene. It provides that those who signed the agreement called Declaration of Four as at 1945 should take the lead and do that. France, the UK, America, and so on.
No, when we talk about interest, yeah, Prof, sorry, okay. Let me come in here because we're really running out of time. You must have heard this other argument that when we talk about NATO and Nigeria is also joining them to recognize the NTC, which some are saying, whether you like it or not, these are the rebels, so whatever name you've chosen to call them, but these are rebels, and Nigeria is also recognizing the rebels. They say those who are supporting them, they have their interest there. The interest could be in Libyan oil or reconstruction work that will finally go on in Libya after the war.
Yes.
What is Nigeria's gain or interest in all of this? Is it the oil, or are we going to get contracts at the end of the day in Libya for reconstruction or rebuilding of Libya?
If you are talking about economic interest, you are looking at it from a very limited approach.
But they said that's the underlying factor.
No, that's for the West.
Yeah.
Nigeria's interest is completely different. Let me just give you one scenario. In Libya, we have the Tuaregs. Now, with the current crisis in Libya, the Tuaregs are already coming back home to Niger and to Chad. Already. Now, with the movement of the Tuaregs to Chad, to Niger, and bearing in mind that Nigeria's northern international boundaries are at best very porous, and considering the fact that the people living on both sides of the international boundary, they have the same cultural links. You cannot even distinguish who is a Chadian, who is a Nigerian from Nigerians. Now, the Tuaregs are likely to come into northern Nigeria. They are now coming with the mentality of the revolution in Libya. They are now coming with the rebellious attitudinal disposition to Nigeria. So, in the foreseeable near future, we are likely to have a situation whereby the Tuaregs will constitute a new source of national security interest in Nigeria. So, it is in Nigeria's longer and larger interest to contain that in advance. So, this is not a question of oil now. And in any case, all countries are interested in one thing or the other. So, this is the way we must look at Nigeria's recognition of the TNC. That's just one consideration, for instance, strategic calculation.